I feel extraordinarily privileged to be here and to share with you what I have been learning for the last 5 years. I've really been having wonderful conversations with people over the last few days, and I want to certainly say thank you to Stephen Shore for putting this together, and to everyone who's participating, and to all of you for coming. In fact, I feel extraordinarily privileged just to be alive right now. And I was born in New York in 1960, and I've always had electricity, a refrigerator, a car in the family. I've had all of these amazing things available 24/7. And I don't know how to look at that other than as an extraordinary privilege. At the same time, I was born to a mother who was drugged unconscious for my arrival. Both of my parents smoked from my conception. I wasn't breastfed. And as I often say, there is nothing special about my birth. But compared to other mammals, if you had any kind of animal born like that, that would be a recipe for disaster. So, like if you separate the mother and infant at birth with puppies, for example, the mother will reject the puppies. And yet that's our standard practice. And I'm saying this because it's about technology. It's our thinking that we know technologically that we can do things better than nature. And then we get into a lot of trouble when we do that. It's all with the best intentions. So I see all of this in the same frame. I do not know how to survive without electricity for more than a few days. I don't know how to survive without a fridge, a phone, or a car. And I have never had a cell phone, but just any kind of a telephone. I don't know how to survive without one for a few days. I certainly would not be here without the internet. I wouldn't be here without the lighting and the microphone and the filming, all of it. So that means that I am completely part of the problem. And I consider that awareness good news. There's a retired professor of management from Boston University, Bill Torbert, and he says, unless you are aware that you are part of the problem, you can't be part of the solution. So, let me announce myself again. I am completely part of the problem. So my new book, which will be out in a couple of months, in April 2019, it's called Our Web of Inconvenient Truths. It's the internet's energy use, toxic waste, and what else I'm sorry, I'm blanking. The internet, energy use, toxic waste, and climate change. And I'd like to read to you the opening from the book. It's not possible to send a text message or an email, take a selfie, watch a video, participate in a video conference, buy anything online, store food in a smart, energy-saving Internet of Things connected refrigerator, drive a zero-emissions hybrid or electric vehicle, do a GPS search, or even power a home with renewable solar panels or wind-powered energy, without extracting from the earth hundreds of minerals, elements, and compounds, including coal, copper, quartz, coltan, cobalt, lithium, neodymium, oil, petroleum coke, and fracked natural gas. Behind every flip phone, smartphone, tablet, smart appliance, and e-vehicle, there are hundreds of refineries, CO2-emitting coal-powered electric plants, nuclear plants, chemical plants, steel mills, cement kilns, metal smelters, wood chips harvested for smelters from tropical forests like the Amazon, and factories of all kinds. To keep running, each energy-guzzling, toxic waste-emitting, and greenhouse gas-emitting operation depends on all of the others. They interconnect by a network of electric substations, power lines, natural gas pipelines, cargo ships, trains, trucks, shipping lanes, railways, highways, telecommunications access networks, and data storage centers to form one gigantic global super factory. In other words, each and every manufactured item and online activity are end products of all the industries and infrastructures in the entire world combined. Calculating the size of a household's carbon footprint is therefore like adding up your monthly bills. Like if you add up your monthly bills to calculate your carbon footprint, that's like estimating the mass of an elephant by weighing only the tip of its tail. To date, carbon calculators do not account for the energy or toxic waste embodied, check that word, embodied in every new product, or the resources used to keep the global super factory going. They don't include the power demands of infrastructure for cellular communications, internet services, or the electric grid itself. They show only a fraction of a household's total environmental impact. Becoming aware of these inconvenient truths is a very personal experience. Questioning our assumptions about the internet and decreasing our footprint require collective action. Thank you for taking that in. I need to go next. I'm going to go back to 1862, when a British economist named William Jevons wrote a book called The Coal Question. So by then, the Industrial Revolution had started, and farmers were being lured, is a simple, kind word for saying what was going on, into urban areas away from their land in order to serve the industrialists who were manufacturing denim jeans and treadle sewing machines and fry pans and guns and the things that started the Industrial Revolution. And everyone began talking about something called energy efficiency. So it was much more efficient to buy a shirt that was factory made than to loom the cloth yourself and make the shirt yourself, if you had the money to buy the shirt, which enough people in Europe had the money to make it profitable for manufacturers. What William Jevons figured out is that energy efficiency actually causes increased energy consumption. because when you make hundreds of thousands or millions or now billions of a product, that requires a lot more energy consumption, a lot more mining of natural resources, a lot more shipping of those resources to the smelters, to the factories, and you begin to see how, because you've got one efficient product, let alone billions of efficient products, you're just increasing consumption in order to make it for a growing population. And of course, all of this efficiency helps us live longer, and the population increases, and so there are about 6 billion more of us than there were, say, at the turn of the century, and we're all using much, I think about, on average, 12 times the amount of energy that our grandparents were using. So energy efficiency causes increased energy consumption. There's another problem, which is that as the price of things goes down, like as the price of a cell phone goes down and more people can afford it because manufacturers can make it more affordably, more people buy them, which again increases consumption. These prices do not reflect the true cost. They don't reflect the environmental costs, and they don't reflect the social costs. If those environmental and social costs were in fact reflected in the price of the things we now depend on, no one could afford them. I'm jumping around here, and thank you for bearing with me. I think I'm a writer and a kindergartner. I was explaining that last night, that I ask a lot of really fantastic dumb questions all day long. And the people I talk with understand that their job is to be patient with me because I usually need things repeated 17 times. But the deal is, if they can get me to understand what they're talking about, then I can explain it to other kindergartners. So, so that's what I do. And then I take all of these pieces and they fall together, kind of like a puzzle, until it all comes together. So I'm kind of giving you a bunch of puzzle pieces. I'm going to give you a couple of startling statistics that certainly startled me when I learned them. They're about the internet. So the entire internet traffic from year 2000, from the whole year in year 2000, is equal to 1 hour of internet traffic from year 2015. And now stay with me and remember the thing that I read at the beginning about all of what it takes to power a Google search or one email. So all of that has grown exponentially from year 2000 to 2015. Of course, it continues to grow, and sometimes I've read that the internet it doubles every 2 years. And along with that growth would be energy consumption, greenhouse gas emissions, consumption of mined material, including conflict minerals, and water, of course. In 2016, the semiconductor industry issued a report explaining that by 2040, we will not have enough electricity to power computers. So that means that either we drastically reduce our consumption of media, or nature will decide for us. We will simply not have enough electricity to power computers. Smartphones are also very significant here. So smartphones showed up in 2000, like around 2007, 2009. I can't, right now I'm not remembering. But when smartphones showed up, then everyone became able to go online all the time when they were standing in line at the grocery, when they were on the train, at a restaurant, whatever. The internet became available 24/7. And that also exponentially increased the growth of the internet. And whenever you hear that, growth of the internet, along with that goes growth of consumption. Smartphones' CO2 emissions will grow from 4% of total global CO2 emissions in 2010 to 11% of total CO2 emissions by 2020. That's next year. So this translates to a jump from 17 to 125 megatons of CO2 equivalent per year. That's a 730% growth. And by 2025, with all of the things I'm going to break down for you that it takes to run the internet, the communications industry could consume 20% of the entire world's electricity. I should also mention that our world now has more cell phones than toilets. We have more cell phones than toothbrushes. Basically, the internet is utterly unsustainable, and we are growing it. So let me explain the internet's main energy guzzlers. And no one has, well, there are a couple people who have compared some of them, like which consumes the most, but they're not, there's a big piece that has not been considered by most researchers, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. So briefly, the four main guzzlers are access networks. Those are cellular antennas, routers, radio transmitters, and of course, certainly for cellular antennas, they all need backup batteries. Manufacturing those batteries, installing them takes tremendous energy. Then data centers, data storage centers. A lot of them are large enough that you can see them from outer space. Like in China, and even in the United States, there are some that are more than 11 million square feet. They are packed with computers that store websites and records and military data and all kinds of things. And in order to keep the computers from overheating, they need air conditioners. And the air conditioners take about 40% of the electricity consumed by data centers. In 2012, Greenpeace calculated that if data centers were a country, they would rank 5th in consumption of energy. I haven't seen any figures in 7 years later about that, but they take an enormous amount of energy. You can find data centers just about everywhere. They're in hospitals, at universities, banks have them, businesses have them, and certainly Google and Facebook and other telecom providers have them. They're enormous guzzlers. And also air conditioners take water, and they emit hydrofluorocarbons, which are more greenhouse gas. They're more potent than carbon dioxide in trapping heat. The fourth energy guzzler is automated processes. And that's like automatic backups on your apps. Like if you have a word processor and you know how it'll just automatically update sometimes, that takes energy. There also, websites are always backed up automatically. And then bots that send advertising. I read incredible figures that bots might take up something like a third of the internet now. I mean, it's quite extraordinary. So I want to talk now. Embodied energy is really one of the things that just knocked me out. And I want to describe one part of embodied energy. I've got this right here. That's the manufacturing of silicon wafers. And you can't have an electronic device without silicon. So you've all heard of semiconductors, transistors. In order to process and store data and provide memory and apps, your phone will have low power microprocessors, optical GPS accelerometers and other sensors, transmitters and receivers for cellular, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth signals, noise filtering microphones. All of these things require semiconductors. So they're made of special materials, usually silicon, that can control the flow of electricity. And transistors, which are the building blocks of computers, are made from semiconductors. Okay, so, and then the chips, the integrated circuits, those are made on silicon wafers of highly purified silicon. Okay. And in case you didn't notice, I was not designed to learn all of this stuff. I don't think any of us were, and here we are. So bear with me, and I'm going to share with you a little that I learned from a machine and process designer who told me what goes into making these transistors. So you begin by mining pure quartz gravel. Then you need wood chips, which is it's wood that comes from a hard, moist wood, typically from the Amazon. And then you need a pure carbon. Typically this will come from tar sands. It's called petroleum coke. It's a byproduct of oil. So these things are all, these three things, the quartz, the pet coke, or the pure carbon, and the wood, are put together in, they're shipped to a smelter, which is kept at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, 330 days per year. Okay, in order to keep a smelter at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit all the time, can you imagine the amount of energy that goes into doing that? If you interrupt the process, you'll blow up the factory, or you'll certainly lose the silicon. No one would want that. So that's step one, and out of that, you get metallurgical grade silicon. It's 98% pure. but that's not going to be useful for electronics or for solar panels. For electronics, they can only handle 1 impurity part per billion. Solar panels can handle 1 impurity part per million. So that means that the metallurgical grade silicon goes to a bell jar furnace that is kept at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and then we get the pure polysilicon that's useful for electronics and for solar panels. And I should just clarify, if you look at a solar panel and it has under the glass all those hundreds of squares, those are silicon wafers. And they can, to have an efficient solar panel, they can handle 1 impurity part per million. Okay, it keeps going through other processes, but you get the picture of the kind of energy that goes into manufacturing this, and the CO2 that's emitted in the process. Renewable energy cannot power these smelters and furnaces. You have to have power going 24/7, or you'll interrupt the process, and that would be very dangerous. I should also say, here's another shocking fact for me. Since 2013, manufacturers have made more of those transistors, those chips, than farmers grow grains of wheat or rice. So this is an enormous shift in our entire environment and our ecological balance and system, and we're unaware of it. If I shift to Rudolf Steiner, do you all know Rudolf Steiner? He died in 1925. He started biodynamic farming, Waldorf schools. He was really quite a wizard. And with Waldorf schools, he believed that every school should be affiliated with a farm. He noted in 1913, so by then there was already electricity, that you could use to light your home. And he was very upset with it. And he said, because of electrification, people will no longer need to think. And what he was observing is that if you just flip a switch on, you don't have to think about it. You just know, is the light bulb working or is it not working for me? You're just flipping a switch. You do not have to know about all the mechanics behind the walls and to the substation, and from the substation to the power station, and then from the power station, is there coal coming or fracked natural gas, or what is allowing you to turn the light on? So Steiner observed 100 years ago, we wouldn't have to, we would lose our ability to think because we wouldn't have to think. The other thing that's going on here is loss of democracy. So if democracy is about power of the people, along with losing, when we flip a switch to turn on an electric light, or to access the internet, or to make a phone call from a phone that you're sitting in a chair here with, without wires even that you see, we are wielding an incredible amount of power. And yet we're unaware of the makings of it. For me, then I lose some of my authority personally when I am not aware of what's going on there. In terms of the federal rules and regulations that govern all of this technology, starting in 1934, when we formed the Federal Communications Commission and the FCC defined harmful interference, which is anything that interferes with existing radio or TV broadcasts, and now internet or cellular services, and harmful interference has never included biological harm, as in it doesn't include nature. And yet we are nature. We are biological creatures. So we're living in this incredibly challenging situation if we operate by biological functions, and yet the engineering needs of our devices are protected, but not our biological functioning. And this has been going on since that was a federal regulation starting in 1934. So as long as most of us have been alive, how do we proceed with that dichotomy? We also have loss of democracy with the Telecommunications Act, which followed up the Broadcasting Act. So Section 704 states that no health or environmental concern may interfere with the placement of cellular antennas. It's interesting for me, with the research I've been doing about the internet's footprint, that would include, I'm assuming that includes, that also prohibits recognizing that we are using way more energy to power this thing than in fact is available to sustain it. But we have no regulations that would say, okay, you guys are going to have to limit what you're doing in order to keep it going for longer. We don't have any rules that respect that we have finite resources here.